So I wanted to make a quick video because of something that I recently came across. I was listening to one of MGTOW United's podcasts a while back, one that he did a while back. I'll be linking it in the bottom. Uh, the one thing that really just kind of blew me away about something that one of the people that he had on there said that a lot of what we have as problems as men, had to do with the fact that a lot of our mothers are behind a lot of why we are behaving the way that some of us might feel towards women, towards our mothers, and etc. And I wanted to tell a quick story about my personal relationship with my mother because it really hits home. Um, and what the gentleman, I can't remember his name, that he said in the podcast is that a lot of our anger is because that we're angry at our mothers, and that's something that either we might not admit or we might not see. But that is actually it was kind of a breakthrough, which is why I wanted to make this quick video, is to talk about it. But that really hits home to me because it's exactly what I was going through for a long time in my life. Um, you know, my mother is from South America. She's Colombian. I don't know Spanish. I should have learned, but I never got around to it. But she was, first thing off is that my mother, she was never the kind of woman that I can remember that would be a kind of person to be physically aggressive with people or to be violent in any manner whatsoever. Um, but that all changed quite quickly when I started to get older. Um, my parents, they were married at the time, and my father and my mother got along to a degree. It actually started to get pretty bad after I started to get older. That's just from what I recall during that time, not because I was getting older, but just because I can remember that far back. Um, something interesting that started to happen amongst my father and my mother is that my mother, she started to get more aggressive. She started to dive herself into, her own thing. She started to watch a lot of dramas on television. She did, she was a stay-at-home mom. She didn't have a job. Um, and she, basically did housework just like any other mom, stay-at-home mom would. No big problem there. Um, but I can remember times in my life that my mother would be extremely aggressive and abusive. I think beyond her power towards me in certain cases. One case I recall, I remember I was coming back home from school and I was, I was on the way back, and I asked her a question, and she replied to tell me to shut up, and I was like, that's not okay. I've always been kind of a rebellious person at heart. During my younger years, I think partly because of my mother and the behavior that she had towards me. Um, but that specific day, she just was not in the mood to talk to me. She was very rude. And I come home and she started yelling at me. And I was like, why is this person yelling at me? It was because I asked a question and I got mad. And then she started throwing things at me. She started to, physically come at me and throw things. I remember she tried to stab me with something like a broom handle, like a end of a broom, and that, things like that. And I was, she'd use the excuse that she was trying to teach me a lesson and discipline me, but I said that's absolutely ridiculous. And the interesting that started to happen is that my father and my mother started to argue, and I rebelled against her. I hate my mother. I mean, to this day, I will never have a good relationship with her because of what I've seen what she's done to me, regardless of whatever she grew up with. I mean, it was not the best behavior from her, and I really will never forget that. But my father and my mother started to argue a lot. They'd always fight about things. And my father, I love my dad. I mean, he's a logical person. I've told him a lot about MGTOW. He doesn't know specifically about the title of it, but he knows about the main message behind it. Um, so I've told him about it, and he knows about it. At this point in my life, he knew nothing about it, neither did I. Um, but as I started to get older, me and my mother started to have less and less of a relationship. I stopped talking to her. We all still lived in the same house at the time, but I just refused to talk to her. We never got along. She never could understand where I was coming from. It was always, you're never good. You're not good enough to do this. I want you to become a this, a that, a lawyer, a doctor, whatever. And I just simply always rebelled against her. I did not like what kind of message and how she was trying to come across to me, and I don't like like I said before, I'm a kind of I was really rebellious at that time. But my father started to realize that I was telling my father, my mom's lying. She's everything that she tells you, it's not true. She's lying and she's trying to over exaggerate. And for a period of time, my father believed her. And eventually, she started to do it to him because I rebelled so much to the point where she couldn't control me. I mean, at some points, I had to I had to physically defend myself against my mother because of the fact that she was being out of control and she was trying to break something. She would break things, just completely, do these things that were completely unnecessary and unlike behavior of my mom. This got worse, and my father eventually said, "You know what? I'm not going to take this anymore." And he sat down with me and he told me that, I'm done with her. I'm going to be leaving. I'm not going to take this anymore. And I told my father, do it. Because they'd been fighting for so long. I mean, I just got sick and tired of hearing the yelling and screaming in the house. I didn't want it anymore. So I told my father, by all means, please, I understand. And that's exactly what he did. And, my father and I have a great relationship. And we've been through a lot of what my mother had to put us through. So, what I ended up realizing after my father left and my mother, stayed at the house, of course, she wouldn't, get rid of the house, of course, and it was always about her. Everything was always about her. All the choices, everything we did, it was classic, like almost feminist rhetoric. I don't know if my mom is one or not, but actually, I don't. I know for a fact that she's not, but a lot of it was emulating that. And what ended up happening, the breakthrough that I had, is that I had rebelled against my mother for so long, and I had said, I am not going to put up with this, and to this very day, I still don't have a very good talking relationship with my mother. And since that day, I'm going to tell you something which is probably going to, honestly, I don't care because this is something that is very meaningful that ended up helping me out. I don't like my mother. I can't stand her. I don't talk to her. I don't listen to her. I completely have realized that a lot of her behavior was completely utter to the demise of my psychological being. And I had gone through therapists and I was suffering from depression and anxiety, and I didn't know why. I had no idea why. All of that shit that I went through was because of my mom. And I said, you know what? I'm leaving it at the doorstep. I'm not coming back to it. She's out of my life, and it's no longer going to be a problem for me. And around that time, I was about 17, I think. That's when I swore off dating, and I just got sick of it. That was way before I discovered MGTOW, but at the time, I was going my own way. I was done with dating and relationships and all that crap. But nonetheless, I think what really had me have a good breakthrough and discover what I was behind all this depression and all of these thoughts and anxiety, and and going into these therapists and these women telling me to talk about my feelings, and I'm thinking, what the fuck are you talking about? My feelings, that's the least of my worries right now is my feelings. My problems is I have much more deep-seated problems. I didn't realize that all that had to do with my mom. And in MGTOW we talk about how, behind every man, or I guess you should say, behind every abusive relationship is an abusive mother raising whoever that was. And I was lucky enough to stop myself, and I was very aggressive during that period of time, hence the very, coincidence of it all. And I worked it out. I worked it out because I put an end to something that I thought was the problem. So I just wanted to make that quick story. I'm kind of in a rush this afternoon, but I want to let the men know out there. I think it's time to let go of the mom. I think it's time. If you had an abusive mother that didn't treat you very well, I think the biggest thing that we have to realize is that it's our mothers. They're the ones who raise us. I love my father. And I think if it wasn't for my father and I having such a good relationship, that I wouldn't have been able to make it out of that. And I think by me defending myself and standing my ground against my mother, that prohibited her from being able to cause any more damage to me when I stood up and I rebelled. And I think that happened for a reason. But nonetheless, I appreciate everybody listening. I hope this helps other people out. And I sure hope that everybody can have a breakthrough at some point and understanding things better for themselves and understanding maybe their problems if they're going through depression or anxiety or whatever, that they'll be able to hopefully work through that. And I think a good place to start looking at that is, how did your mom treat you? So thanks, guys. Appreciate it. Have a good evening.